Hello, it's the Redeye stream number 86. Kill the NRA, ban bumpstocks, and a march for gun control on Hitler's birthday. Wow, this should be fun. They also want to lower the voting age to 16 while raising the age to buy a gun to 25. How ridiculous is this world getting, MC? Come on, are you about ready to rip your eyeballs out yet?
I wouldn't say I'm ready to rip my eyeballs out, but I'm not surprised. First of all, with what just happened in Parkland, the idea that somehow things are going to change dramatically is going through everybody's head, and everybody's in a tizzy, everybody's in a panic, and you know we go through these cycles in this, right? One of the problems is, of course, and I've been very quiet for the most part on the kids, right? But now that the kids are coming out and making political statements repeatedly on the press, they better expect to have to deal with, you know, no one's going to tolerate your bullshit anymore. You're going to have to stop acting like children, and you're going to have to start giving real freaking answers to hard questions that you're not prepared to answer.
Oh, MC, speaking of, well, not to cut you off right there, but that's a good point, and I want to ask you about the news broadcast where it seemed like the CNN reporter was coaching the kid. Was the kid just nervous, or was that a coaching job?
Well, probably a little bit of both. All right, but the reality, it doesn't. The thing is they can go on CNN, they can go on these networks, and they think that they're all going to walk away and they're not going to catch hell. And they think that the press is going to be able to cover for them. And the press will try. Take a look at the Washington Post today talking about how disgusting some of the responses have been to these kids. Now, don't get me wrong. I fully have some sympathy for their attitude to some of these kids. But I'll tell you something right now. You guys better be prepared. If you're going to make yourself in the public, if you're going to go into the public eye, and that's where you want to put yourself, then you are now a public figure. And you're going to take the slings and arrows. And I know a lot of people don't want to, you know, they want to feel empathy. They want to feel sorrow for these kids, right? Which to a point I can empathize to a point, right? But I'm sorry, it doesn't make your hysterical whining about gun control any more valid because you've got your fifis hurt. That you feel terrified. You wouldn't have felt terrified, all right, if those teachers had weapons, all right, when that idiot came in there and started gunning people down and got gunned down back. You'd have felt grateful to those teachers to be able to defend themselves. Instead, you're crying over their dead bodies as bullets slammed into them as they covered up for you. Okay, yeah, I understand you felt terrified, but I bet the guy who died in your trying to protect you, those people that died trying to protect you, all right, felt helpless when they didn't have to be. I bet that coach felt helpless when if he had a weapon, he wouldn't have been helpless. And that's the problem with this. If you want to stop these school shootings, all right, then you got to get away from this attitude of gun-free zones. Why is it that somehow banning these weapons is somehow going to fix things? Just today, there was a report, the AP reported, all right, in Nigeria, Boko Haram attacked a school and took 50 of the girls out of the school. All right. Boko Haram, this is in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria. What does Nigeria have? Nigeria has, if you want to have a weapon, you have to get a permit and a license for it. Did a lot of good there, didn't it? Did a hell of a lot of good there. All right. The idea that somehow gun control is going to prevent these kinds of things from happening is just nonsense.
Well, MC, you don't even have to go as far as Africa, because I did a video on it a few months ago, and LA or California, the state of California has the hardest gun laws in all of America. Guess where the highest murder rate is by gun?
Oh, I know. I understand.
You know, so again, you just look, and the same goes for New York.
Chicago.
Yeah, all the places that have hard gun laws have the highest gun crime. Surprise, surprise. Because here's something that these fucking idiots don't understand. The criminals don't give a shit about your laws. You know?
Yeah. No, I understand,
Well,
and I
no,
understand that
and
too. But why nobody wants to? Why I understand people are worried about talking about these kids, but these kids put themselves in the public eye. If they're not expecting any kind of pushback, they're out of their minds. And all the people who want to go up there, you can't do that. How horrible it is to say these things about these kids. These kids put themselves in the public eye. They're part of the public sphere. They want to be part of the public discourse. Then fine. Dinesh D'Souza sent out a tweet, right? Basically, where he took a picture of the students that were crying because the legislature in Florida refused to take up gun control legislation in the state. And he said, probably, worst thing these kids have ever seen since the time they were told that they were going to have to get a job for summer school. Right. And the outrage of people going, oh, classy. Oh, how horrible. This is disgusting. No, it's not. He didn't say anything harmful to these kids. He told them to stop acting like children. If you're going to come in to the adult sphere, which politics has to be run by the adults, it can't be run by kids, for crying out loud. We have enough children, all right, running things as it is, right? You better expect to be able to have some, toughness to you. This idea that you're going to cry and that I should sit up there and just melt for that. I'm sorry. You're gonna sit up there and point a finger to me and say, I have no reason to lecture. You have no right to tell me what I went through. You have no right to understand it. Really? Me, of all people? I have no right? You're speaking to everybody else when you make those kind of comments, which means you're speaking to every one of the veterans that served overseas in the wars. And you're going to frickin' point a finger at us and say, we have no right? Screw you, you little frickin' bitch.
Well, not only that, but MC, one thing I don't think the media is really talking about, I believe the student body is actually split on this issue. You have seen some interviews with other kids who said, if the teachers had a gun, then they would have been able to protect us. And the people that protected the most children were in the ROTC program, were they not?
Well, obviously some of the ones that were shot were in the ROTC program. 3 of them were. And to be honest, the ones that wanted to apply for West Point, it's a classy. This is a classy thing. It's West Point.
Well, real quick, I gotta get the hang of how to do this. But I have my first super chat ever. Thank you, Captain Copile. Blow me, MP. No, sir, I will not blow you. Go ahead and continue.
All right. The idea that the West Point would, at least possibly grant these kids admittance. All right, shows you what the military, thinks of the ROTC type programs. They understand and they how important these kind of programs can be. All right, to raise people especially in high school, to give them an outlet. All right, and give them standardization and give them discipline. All right, because that's what you need to have when you go into the military. Now, granted, you're going to see some of that. You're going to get some of that when you go through, basic training and so forth. All right, but when you talk about officer training and everything, it's to give these kids an advantage, to give them just an outlook, even if they decide they don't want to make the military career when they leave high school and they don't want to go into the service at all. At least it gives them the sense of self-discipline. If nothing else, one of the things that military gets through your freaking thick skulls full of mush when you're young, right, is that how important it is to be somewhere on time. And I can't tell you how important that is for work, to be at work on time. All right. Because of what people, these are things that people rely upon, is that you're somewhere on time. Is it a perfect world? Of course not. But the reality is that so many kids today, at least from my perspective, being the old man who yells at clouds, all right, don't have a very good appreciation whatsoever for being somewhere on time. They think the world revolves around them, not that they need to sit up there and make self-sacrifices in any way, shape, or form. And that's not how the world works.
But yeah, getting back to my question though, don't you think the student body itself is kind of divided, especially the parents of the community? And if it's so divided, is this march that they want to do on 420 of all days? First off, the National Weed Holiday, that's stupid. The fact that it's Hitler's birthday and he would love gun control is ironic. Come on. I mean,
well,
if they're going to put themselves, like you said, into politics, then they should take their lumps, right?
Well, it is a divided community. It is a divisive issue, right? The fact is that the press is not pointing this out. They're not willing to give equal time because if it bleeds, it leads, which is part of the scenario. They like the fact that you got emotion and you're emoting on television, right? Which from a visual standpoint, that's what visuals are good for. Visuals are good for emotional context. Okay. So from that standpoint, it's understandable. But at the same time, is this gun control, is it really going to happen? No, not in any significant manner. You want my opinion? The only thing that Trump has specifically stated that he wants to do is he wants to tighten down some of the background checks and make sure that the background checks are going through correctly. Now, in this case, let's be perfectly frank. If this kid was this troubled, he's had 37 visits by the police, all right, a background check should have identified that. If he purchased this weapon, which I don't know if he's the one who purchased the weapon or not. All right, so the fact that the family had a safe and had the weapon in the safe, yet somehow he knew the combination to the safe, points to another issue. Now, granted, I keep calling him a kid, but the reality is he's 19 years old. He was an adult. So, I mean, there's no question about how he's not going to be tried as a juvenile. All right. So if you're going to look at it from that perspective, now the idea that somehow raising the age here to 25, 26, or 21, right, is going to have any effect? No, it's not going to have any effect whatsoever.
Well, and I have a question here. If they raise, let's say 21, what about the age for hunting? Because right now you have to go through your hunter safety course, but you can get a hunting license at 13. I was going to put my son through the course this coming up year. He's turning 13 in May. So, I mean, are they going to try and change that also?
Well, they definitely would have to if it becomes a federal law. You'd have to sit up there and have some kind of, recognition of how you're going to approach that. It doesn't stop somebody from hunting necessarily. I mean, obviously you can go with bows, you can go with crossbows, etc.
I just think it's really interesting. They would have to shake up so many laws to just raise this age federally.
They could make it very simple to say that semi-automatic weapons require someone to be 21 years old. Right? You have that rule already in place for handguns.
Yeah, very good point. I hear a lot of people on the right saying Trump has betrayed the right by trying to issue this bump stock ban. They're also banning certain types of triggers. The bump stock ban, for one, is completely ridiculous. I have shown on the Redeye, if you go back right after the Vegas shooting, that it is possible to do the same thing a bump stock does with your belt loop or a stick. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just an add-on. It's a custom job on your gun. It does nothing really. And there's only one real shooting involving a bump stock ever. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but you have to remember, Maud, think of the long game. This is political. I guarantee you Trump doesn't even believe in this thing. But you think about it. If there's ever another school shooting, and the press go after him, he can turn around, well, look what I tried to pass. This is him thinking in 2 steps ahead politically to
Well,
cover his own ass.
if that's the stance, then it's a stupid stance, because that's not what the press will do. The press will go after him, sure, but what they're just going to say is that you need even more gun control. Giving these people an inch on this on this, right? It's just silly. Now, as far as what Trump is doing, let's see what comes out. I hear all sorts of things saying, well, we're going to see this, we're going to see that, we're going to see that. We haven't seen anything yet, and a lot of that is, yeah, you've got to be concerned, because when people get whipped up into a frenzy, right, a lot of this stuff can happen. But if we haven't seen anything yet, let's wait and have something to complain about before we go out and start complaining about it. I'm not one to listen to talk. I want to see action. Let's see what actually comes out.
Well, he has directed Attorney General Jeff Sessions to make these changes himself, I believe. So it's not going to go through Congress. It's more like an executive order.
Well, how are you going to do that going through Congress? Well, going through Congress.
Can't they make a law banning them in Congress?
No.
Isn't that their job, to legislate new laws?
No, you cannot legislate new laws. Now, he can sit up there and say that the definition of an illegal modification can be X, Y, and Z. That he can do, to say that this is what we consider a defining aspect of this law. The laws are somewhat loose in that regard, especially when it comes to automatic weapons. All right. However, even in those cases, is it substantially modifying the weapon or not? Now, in some cases, when you start talking about modification of weapons and things, all right, I think that you could make a good case to say, yeah, you're really modifying this weapon with the way certain of these quote unquote bump stocks are actually built, because you're actually replacing the lower receiver. All right. That's not true of all cases. Don't get me wrong. There are other cases where somebody is just holding a stick or is taping a stick on there. That's not a significant modification. You're going to have a bad time getting that through. So it's going to come down to, okay, they're just going to look at, okay, what is it that they're saying we can do? What is it they're saying we can't do? And people are just going to go around it like they always have. Just like during during Clinton's assault weapons ban, all they did was look at and say, okay, what cosmetic features do I have to change to make this not fit with the assault weapons because it looked mean, right? So they basically took off the flash suppressors on half of the weapons, and all of a sudden they were legal now. That was the only modification that was made, right? So it's the same thing's going to happen here, if that at all. But once again, he can direct Sessions to do X, Y, and Z all he wants. And Sessions can put out whatever he wants, which, they can do a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. But let's see what they actually come back with before we start complaining about
it. Well, even the NRA is supporting the ban on bump stocks. They came out with a statement in support of it, and they did that way back right after the Vegas shooting. And the left, that's part of the topics for today. The left wants to, quote unquote, kill the NRA. I don't believe the left could kill the NRA. Way too many donors, way too many members. But the NRA itself could kill itself. There are other gun advocate groups that are gaining in popularity because they are not backing down on these issues like the NRA is.
Well, once again, I mean, everyone's, you're making some kind of comments, but right now, are bump stocks in any form illegal?
Not yet, no.
Oh, okay. So before we start complaining about this, that, and whatever, and then rail against how we got to fix these things, let's wait for the problem to actually occur. Let's not borrow trouble before it happens.
Yeah, but even like I said, a lot of people are even saying by Trump advocating for this, he has betrayed his own base. Could that come back to haunt him politically at least? I don't think he has. And I'm not part of his base. I've made that very clear.
We will see, all right? Because once again, whether he's betrayed the base, how many times have people say, well, If he's given up on the wall, he's gone. He's given up on the wall. He's gonna push amnesty. He's gonna do all these things. Has he lost the base yet? No. Why not? Because he hasn't actually done any of those things. Right? There's one thing in politics to have people saying and fear mongering, going, "What does this mean? What does that mean?" All right, and saying this is what it's going to mean, and be totally wrong about it. Even the idea of what can you do with some of these bump stocks, all right, or how are you going to ban some of these things, all right? Well, you have to wait and see. You have to wait and see what's actually produced before you can really make a complaint or say whether or not he's actually betrayed you or not betrayed you on this specific issue or that specific issue. It's just like people saying, "Well, he's betrayed us on Obamacare. He didn't kill Obamacare." Well, okay, you can say that if you want. Unfortunately, this whole idea of what he can do with Obamacare is quite limited. All right, there's a lot of people who think that he's killed Obamacare with this latest tax bill. Personally, I don't think that's the case because there's still a lot about Obamacare that's still in place, and it's going to have to be totally revamped if you're going to have any kind of system whatsoever. But regardless, okay, has he actually done that? No, he hasn't. Is he still trying to fight for getting these kind of reforms in? Well, yes. Okay, well then, let's wait and see. There are more, when you talk about politics, there's more players than just the president and Jeff Sessions and the executive branch. Right? When it comes to bump stocks and defining what a bump stock is, that's the first thing they're going to have to come back with. Is they're going to have to come back with the definition of a bump stock. If the definition of a bump stock it doesn't really change things, then it's words without meaning, and more than likely that's what's going to happen because there's no way to define what a bump stock, quote unquote, is per se. So how are you going to fix this? The fact that you can use a stick, all right, as a bump stock, all right. I mean, these things are going to be shown to Sessions. They're going to. So how are you going to write the law to prevent this kind of stuff? So they're going to have to make some Faustian choices on how they word their language, all right, if they even come out with anything, right? Which, okay, I hear what everyone's saying. I'm telling Sessions to do this. Well, even then, he could be saying, "Yeah, I'm telling Sessions to do this," and then getting on the phone saying, "Yeah, I'm telling you to do this, but don't do anything." You don't know if that's happening either. All right, you don't know if this is just for public consumption, media consumption.
So do you really think that's a plausible theory, that there's so much outcry that's straight up out of emotion right now, even from our representatives, especially in Florida? I'm sure the politics in Florida is heating up right now in the wake of this tragedy. There's no other way around it. But you can't vote out of emotion. You have to vote with your brain, not your heart. So do you think he's just blowing hot air to calm the sea a little bit, and then a couple months away he's going to change his mind?
Do you actually believe that people vote with their brains, though?
No. Unfortunately, they don't. If you look at right after 9/11, that's
many do and many don't. Okay, I mean it is what it is. When in this last election, I would say the majority of the states voted for someone with a brain rather than voting on emotion. Okay, that's not the majority of the people, granted, but then again, in blue states, they're kind of like lost anyway. But I don't, in this case here, I don't know what Trump is doing, all right? But at the same time, I'm willing to take a wait and see what happens. All right, I know for a fact that getting riled up about all this stuff in this kind of a thing, 1 week away from this tragedy, right, when nothing has actually happened, is borrowing trouble, and I don't think it serves any purpose to borrow trouble there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about borrowing trouble. Let's talk about this number: 18 school shootings already this year. That's a fabricated number. A couple of those incidents, or at least one in particular, was a suicide outside a school that's been closed for months. They consider that a school shooting. Is the media conflating these figures to try and turn public opinion? I think I know the answer to that.
Of course it is. The media is hardcore left. Gun control has been a wet dream of the leftists, all right, forever. All right. The fact is that the only reason Obama did not push gun control was he didn't have an incident like this. All right. They had the Pulse nightclub shooting. Okay. During the Pulse nightclub shooting, they immediately tried to do it and got immediately slapped down. Why? Well, to be honest, the main reason was because you weren't talking about kids. You weren't talking about, quote unquote, society's definition of innocence. Right? You were talking about a bunch of freaking drunk people in a bar. All right. No one cares. All right. Then on top of that, you find out it was a quote unquote gay bar, and the attack was done by a jihadist who was attacking gays in a gay bar. All right. And so the whole gun control debate, wasn't there for them. All right. Like I said, if you tried to move gun control, all right, without an incident like this, what ends up happening, of course, is you run into the fact that, okay, let's say in his first term, he attempted to do this. Now, he already lost control of the House. He'd already lost control of the Senate. It would have gotten way harder because he would have lost even more seats. All right. That they understood this. Believe it or not, the Democrats do understand that gun rights is one of the few things, it's a third rail to them. They can't talk it down unless there's an incident like this where they can scream, look, it's the children, listen to the children. Okay. The problem with that rhetoric is that how long does it last? Oh, it'll last. I guarantee it'll last a week, maybe two. Next week, though, honestly, it's already going away. Next week, it'll be gone for the most part. Yeah, they'll still be trying to bring it out, and then of course they'll have this march. Okay, we'll see how that turns out. We'll see who shows up for this quote unquote march, because I suspect it'll be the same people carrying the same signs, and you'll have the black bloc there, and the black bloc will make trouble. That's what you're going to see, which is going to totally destroy any of the credibility that they have. This is what I suspect is going to happen.
Well, and we've talked before about solutions to the school shooting problem, and the one we came up with, I think, was arming the teachers. Well, I have another solution, because I think the population of the schools where they're shoving 30 or 40 kids in per class is letting a lot of these cases slip through the cracks. Oregon actually has a bill that I support for once coming before the House here in Salem. They want to lower all class sizes to about 25 students per class. So what that's going to do is make more student and teacher one-on-one time, and a lot less of these things are going to slip through the cracks.
I don't think it's that solution is going to be as effective as a different one, and that is lower the number of students in a specific school. All right. I think one of the problems that you end up having in these large schools is they themselves start to depersonalize things because they are so large. If you're a member of, I'm in a humongous, class size, it dehumanizes everything. When you have a graduating class of 5,000 people, okay, and during the graduating class, you take a look at you have to get an auditorium, all right, or a college basketball gymnasium, just to hold the family members, all right, while you march through, and then they're there for 2 hours as they read off the names to hand out diplomas, okay. It depersonalizes things from the type of small little community schools can be. So if you take schools and you take them down and saying the largest size of a high school will be, let's say, I'll just choose an arbitrary number, 500, all right, to where a graduating class is around 100, all right, it becomes a much smaller community, all right. And what I mean by that is this. When I say community, the community includes the teachers. Yeah, but it also includes the students. All right. There's fewer students. They all now know one another. It's not that, well, this guy graduated with me, but I never really knew who he was, all right, or I never really knew who she was, all right. All that goes out of the way, goes out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. My ex has to pick up our son from school today. I don't think they're gonna have school tomorrow. We're getting another half foot of snow tonight. So I called the school and I'm like, I said my name and I'm like, I'm Christian's dad. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll send a note. Like they knew exactly who I was once I said my last name. That's because we have a really small charter school up here, and I'm not afraid to send my children to that school. I don't believe some psycho is going to walk in there with any type of gun. And it doesn't matter if it's an AR-15 or a 9mm Glock. Any gun can kill somebody. So banning one certain type of gun or an attachment to said gun is ridiculous to me.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, right? The thing about banning bump stocks, all right, how is banning bump stocks going to stop this tragedy? I hate to tell everybody this, but unfortunately, creating a bump stock, you can print it online. So how are you going to ban it? There are 3D printers. How are you going to ban this stuff? Right?
Well, the 3D printer stuff are kind of in their alpha stage right now. They're not really particularly effective.
The 3D printing of the bump stocks? I disagree with you.
Well, weapons in general.
No, weapons for weapons in general, I would agree with you. But when it comes to bump stocks, they're well developed. So if you ban a bump stock, okay, you ban a bump stock, people can't have them. Is that going to stop a shooter from having it? Somebody that's intent on doing this kind of chaos? No, because he's going to go online, go, okay, this is how I make a bump stock. He's going to go in the woods somewhere. He's going to test it out, and people are going to hear, automatic gunfire, but they're not going to think anything of it, right? That's what's going to happen. And then they're going to say, okay, and then that person is going to sit up there and commit the carnage again, if he thinks he can get away with it. Now, if he understood that there were people in that school that were armed, if that school had put out there that we have people that were armed in the school, throughout the school, all over the place, both concealed carry and non-concealed carry, this guy wouldn't have attacked the school. Why? Because he couldn't convince himself that he was going to be able to do what he wanted to, which is commit mass murder. His chances of committing mass murder have gone down if nowhere else in his own mind. So in order to create an attack like this and actually to attack a school and be effective, now you've got to do a lot more thinking, a lot more planning, a lot more consideration. And it's not just going to be on the whim when you woke up one day and said, screw it, this is the day I go out there and kill a bunch of people.
Well, and not to mention, I don't believe he wanted to die himself. I believe he wanted to commit this crime and get away with it. That's why he blended in with the crowd, dropped the gun, blended in with the crowd, and escaped. And then when he's confronted by the cops, he didn't try and run. He didn't pull out a pistol. He gave himself up willingly. That is not somebody trying to do suicide by cop, is it?
Well, it goes down to when, all right, if you're trying to do suicide by cop or suicide by any method, all right, that doesn't mean that as you start to go through with the situation, you don't pull back and say, okay, I'm not going to go. There are plenty of people that have gone out on ledges to commit suicide and jump, and that have crawled back and never actually done it. Now, granted, this is more of an extreme case, but same situation. The idea may have initially occurred to him that he was committing suicide, but at the same time, the fact he didn't go through with it, I mean, it could be several reasons for
it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the gun is the issue. I mean, if he wanted to, he could have drove a car down into the school and ran people over as they're getting off the bus. You know what I mean? It's not the gun. So this emotional outrage that always happens, it's just ridiculous. And I believe, to segue into the 16-year-old voting age, I think that's why they want to lower the voting age. Because what's that going to give? It's going to give the Democrats a large anti-gun population to have vote for them, is it not?
Well, it's an attempt to increase the voting, the voting block of the Democrats for sure. I mean, that's the main purpose of it, because teenagers are more emotional. All right, and in fact, there's been studies that show that up until you're about 22, 23, 24, all right, the emotional part of your brain is the most significant part of your brain as far as when you're developing, all right, because your brain isn't fully developed until approximately 24, 25. All right, so if you give people the voting rights, all right, at 16, well, then what you did is you increase the population that can vote, all right, at the same time, you're increasing it with a group of people that can be far more easily swayed by emotion because they're not emotionally mature yet, right? So, and quite frankly, they're childish. They make childish, and I'm not trying to belittle these people, but they make childish decisions. They're not thinking fully. They don't have enough life experience, and enough mental acuity to block out their own emotions and let them override. They don't have the life experience for the most part. Now there are always exceptions to the rules. Do not get me wrong.
I would have voted for Trump.
Well, there are, like I said, there are exceptions to the rules, but the reality is for the most part they haven't gotten the life experience to show them, okay, acting emotionally here is rash. Their ability to identify when they're acting emotionally, all right, is not as well developed as when they're 25. Right. So if you want to argue against science is what tells you this. Are you going to tell us that this is a science thing, that you don't believe in science?
Well, and there's other reasons. Okay, so you lower the voting age to 16. That means you're an adult at 16. You're still in high school. Are you supposed to move out and live on your own? Are you now able to join the military at 16? Are you able to choose who you have as a sexual partner at 16? Where do you draw the line?
Over here, Mod, you can actually join the military at 16.
Without parental approval?
Yep. Yeah, you can actually join at 15 with parental approval.
Well, that's because you guys want them on ships where you can freaking bugger them.
Well, what other reason would you want to put young people on ships? Jesus.
All they're looking for are willing cabin boys.
Well, someone has to do the messy jobs. Sorry, I broke your train of thought there, Maud.
Oh no, I was ending it right there because I mean, really, what are they an adult at 16? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then no, they can't vote at 16.
Well, I think you have to take in. I'm not to sound like the anti-commie, but I think you have to take in the individual. I mean, at 16, I was in full-time employment. I was paying bills, so that part of me was adult. Of course, at the same time, I was going out and pissing away all my money at the weekend, so that part of me wasn't adult. So I'd say you'd probably get a few people who would be able to make a conscious, well-reasoned choice at that age, but they would definitely be in the tiny minority.
Well, I mean, back in the day, you were considered an adult at what, 15 or 14, pretty much? So as we've advanced as a society and age, the life expectancy has gone up, we have moved the benchmark up to 18 or 21, at least here in the States. If we're going to move it back down, how are we going to simultaneously move the age to buy a gun up? I mean, once again, are you an adult or are you not? Like, MC, do you think you should have been allowed to join the military at 16? What were you doing at 16? I was homeless and partying. I didn't even care I was homeless. I was having a great fucking time. I wasn't necessarily an adult. I was making stupid decisions like a child because I was still a child.
I was living on a farm with my family. What the heck do you want me to be doing?
Well, should you have been voting at that point? And if you were, would you
No.
have voted your own conscience, or would you have voted what your dad voted?
I would have voted. Well, I would have voted how I felt. I've always been like that. My I'm not a I'm not necessarily a follower of my parents. Even when I was at that age, I was kind of the black sheep of the family in a lot of ways. It's not saying that my parents, didn't influence me or didn't have influence into me by that time. Would I have been voting more conservative than my peers? Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that I was necessarily eligible or rational about how I was looking at the world necessarily in the as I was when I was 21. Now, as far as joining the military, to be honest, 16 is a bit young. I have no problem by if people want to, when they're 17 years old, get parental permission to actually join the military when they're 17 if they have parental permission. But I would keep the minimum age at 18. But then again, I'm going to be real frank with you. I never believed that we should have taken the drinking age and ever put it to 21.
Yeah, my mom was telling me when she was growing up, it was 18 down in Louisiana. So they raised it. That's a recent construct of how they've raised the drinking age within the last 20 years, I think.
Why are you asking the old man? Shouldn't you be asking me?
Okay. What's your opinion then? Do you think not only yourself, but other people 16 are they mentally fit to vote, do you think?
No, not really. Like I said, I think it should be a privilege rather than a right, like in some countries.
You think voting should be a privilege?
Yeah.
Well, no, let's examine that. Do you want to go back to the land owning stipulation? Is that what your contention is?
Well, maybe not exactly that, but sorry about that. Hold on.
Hey, what's up, Coffee? Welcome.
What's going on?
Yes, and no one with a gold star gets to vote.
Okay, as I was saying, in some countries, they have what is it, Switzerland? You aren't able to vote unless you've been in the military. Because you should. I don't think we should go back to the property thing, but maybe have a different system where you have to contribute in some way on a societal level.
I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't mind making it so that you have to serve in the military or the forces, armed forces, before you're allowed to vote, to be eligible to vote. In my opinion, that would be fine.
Wait, so just the military, or like the Peace Corps, or some other type of government organization?
Like I
Peace
said,
Corps, really?
Coffee.
Well, I brought up Peace Corps because
seriously?
Coffee during Vietnam, if you didn't want to go serve, that was another way to where you weren't a draft dodger, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there is a reason I said that.
16's far too early, especially with the kind of idiots we have running around now. But I don't know if I would go as far as to say that it should be the military. It should be military service, but it should be something.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't
that.
have to just be military service. I mean, that would obviously be the primary one, but
it could just be having a job for a certain amount of time.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd go with that too, Coffee.
Well, why can't it be something as simple as, okay, do we have military service along the lines of Germany? Whereas you go into the military or you go into a kind of Polizei. People constantly complain that we don't have enough police on the frickin' streets. Okay, well, here you go.
That would be great. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, and all the 16-year-old part-time cops would spend all their time stopping all the girls. Yeah.
You think that this is just going to be men?
Yeah, the 16-year-old girls will put in all the 16-year-old boys in prison.
Hey, Israel has men and women serve in the army too before they can do certain things. I think it's before they get citizenship.
I think that's just mandatory.
I mean, I don't mind. Well, that's just mandatory because they need total population to be willing to be armed in order to defend themselves, or not. They're not. Otherwise, they'd have been destroyed a long time ago. Now, what they don't have in Israel is they don't have mixed units, right? But that's a separate thing.
Yeah, I would say you have to have had done some level of service to the country in order to gain the privilege, just like you have certain other privileges.
We can put that in our those state bylaws.
I'm not for compulsory. I'm not even for selective services. I didn't
say it would be compulsive. It would just be, those who go in. They.
There's nothing that says that you have to go in there or do any of these things. Just that if you don't do these things, you're not eligible to vote.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that for when I didn't serve in the military, so you would be disenfranchising me immediately if you passed that law. And now I'm 33. I'm almost too old to even join if I wanted to.
Well, I think there'd obviously be some grandfathering going in. I'll be right back, guys.
We should maybe at the very least register for selective service. Do you know how many people don't do that in our country? Don't sign up for the draft.
Yeah, I signed up for the draft. Everybody has to, especially if you want to go to college and get financial aid. So
you're supposed to. You don't necessarily have to, but it should be mandatory, I would think, especially if you want to vote.
So, would you expand selective services for women as well, then?
Yes.
Well, that would be equality, would it not?
That's what they wanted.
My dad, he enlisted when he was 16 as well. I've considered it. I'm not sure.
Well, and since you just jumped in, Coffee, I'm going to ask you a question I asked MC at the beginning of the show. A lot of the right-wing voting bloc is screaming right now about how Trump has betrayed them with this bump stock thing. Are you in the same boat?
I'm not happy, but I also don't care. Because I don't plan to ever need to use one. It's like, it literally doesn't affect me, so I don't care. But in terms of like excuse me. In terms of like gun rights and liberty, I'm not very happy, but like I said, it doesn't really affect me.
Use what? A bump stock?
Yeah. I don't see that that's really necessary. I mean, most of the reason we have guns anyway is for hunting and to repel, like, a tyrannical government. Well, I don't see us overthrowing the government anytime soon.
Yeah, but a bump stock would help if you had, they don't march in line anymore.
The bump stocks aren't really all that great if you've seen videos of them.
Yeah, I don't really think it. Like if you're building up an arsenal to fight against the government, you probably don't really need the bump stocks.
A lot.
You're probably gonna have better weapons.
Oh, absolutely. The bump stock makes the AR completely inaccurate. It's just jumping all over the place. You can't hit the broadside of a barn with a bump stock on.
Right.
But is it not a slippery slope? You ban bump stocks and certain triggers today. Tomorrow you want to ban collapsible stocks for the SKS, and then so forth and so forth.
It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. This is America, but anyway, you know. I mean, it I really don't see that this is a big deal. Now, my first reaction when I heard it was like, really? But then again, you know, I support, you know, more thorough background checks, you know? So, I mean, I don't think anybody should be out there able to go out there and just get a gun. On the same token, I don't think you should be able to get a modification for your gun to make it a lot more, to shoot more than it's supposed to. I don't really see the point in those being legal.
It doesn't shoot more than it's supposed to. It's still a semi-auto weapon. It's just moving the gun to bounce against your finger and make you squeeze the trigger faster. That's all it's doing. It's just
squeezing the trigger faster, making you shoot more.
But it's still a semi-auto. An automatic weapon, you hold the trigger down and it fires.
Right.
That's an automatic weapon. We're still talking about semi-auto weapons. Automatic weapons are still banned. They haven't legalized a BAR, for example.
I don't see bump stock as being necessary. Like you said, it reduces your accuracy anyway. What is what is the function of a bump stock? What practical function does it serve?
Yeah, good point. It's for target shooting and having fun out at the range with your friends. That's what it's for. There's no real reason other than that.
Okay, does anybody else have any opinions on what a bump stock's actually for? I mean, it's great if you're going to sit a couple stories above a hotel and shoot down on a crowd. Otherwise, it doesn't really serve a lot of practical use.
If you had an actual, even if you had a semi-auto, you would have been more effective. Just a regular semi-auto.
That's what I'm saying.
You don't need the bump stock. It's completely ineffective.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's like I'm not really happy that Trump is doing this, but at the end of the day, I don't care because I don't, there's really no practical use for him anyway.
Well, whether it's a practical use or not, it's banning it. All right, what's it going to serve? Okay, so
it's a political move,
but whether or not somebody sees whether you see a practical use for it or not, it's not going to be the question. If somebody decides that they want to do something, why should the government necessarily be saying no? You shouldn't allow this. In practicality, like I was saying earlier, the big thing for me is I hear a lot. I haven't seen anything. So before I'm going to complain about what's actually happened, not what some people think.
What has actually happened is no. What has actually happened was they were used in the Las Vegas shooting, right?
Okay.
That's the reason they're even in the public discourse to begin with.
Well, that's I understand that. I mean,
okay.
What I'm talking about as far as the action from government action from Trump.
I mean, it's obviously a political move. One I'm not really happy about.
It's political rhetoric at this point, which is okay. Political rhetoric is worth what?
He's scoring points with the left, I guess.
Okay.
Well, and I want to dig into the background checks. You are in favor of more thorough. Could you elaborate? Because I had a background check done, and they checked my criminal history. They checked everything that they needed to, and it was a federal background check. I don't know how much more thorough they could really get.
Well, yeah, but when I say things like that, I'm referring to things like, okay, that's how you went through, right? Maybe that day everything was working well, but there are other days maybe there isn't enough people to staff certain positions, et cetera, et cetera. I think those things need to be looked into.
Well, are you in favor of the 7-day waiting time then for a pistol? We don't have that in Oregon, but other states have that.
I personally, from when you talk about a waiting period, like a 7-day waiting period, a 7-day waiting period isn't onerous enough for me to say that it shouldn't exist. So I have no problem with a waiting period. Now 7 days would be the limit though. Any more than that, and then I would have an issue.
What's wrong with what about 14 days? I mean, what's your stated purpose for buying the handgun in the first place? Is it self-defense?
Well,
do you even have to declare that?
No, I don't think you should have to.
No, you don't have to tell them why you're buying a gun.
The purpose in my mind of a waiting period, right, is a cool down sequence. All right, there are a lot of people that are running high on emotions, all right, and so you give them a cool down factor. Is it going to stop the guy who's intent on murder? No. All right, it isn't. But then nothing is. So I understand that. But is it going to stop the person who sits up there and is, I'm feeling bad today. I really want to just go buy a gun and end it all? Yeah, it'll stop that.
I don't know why we would care about that necessarily.
Well,
the reason I care about that, to be honest, one, my friend killed himself. So suicide is kind of a touchy issue. But number two, they lump all the suicides in with suicide rates. And then they go and they point at it and go, hey, look, all these guns are killing all these Americans every day, and we need to end it. It's more ways for them to rhetoric to take the guns or gun parts in this instance.
Hello, all.
How's it going, Cole?
Yeah.
All going good. I was just wanting to debunk a couple myths here while they're being discussed. You can shoot any gun as fast as a full auto, or pretty damn close to it, where you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And I mean any gun. If you'd watched that link I was trying to link earlier, Crowder takes a what's it called, lever action. I mean, where you got to cock it every single time.
Bold action.
And it shows the record on that, which of course was the world's record. But 20 hours of practice, you can get 90% of that speed. And it's like ting 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 ting. That's what's something you got to cock every single goddamn time. Any kind of semi-auto or anything like that, you just pull the trigger faster. You use other techniques. You can use a belt loop as a bump stock. So a lot of that trying to stop it through regulations just not going to work. I mean, it's as effective as regulating the alcohol market, which was it about 1,000 people a year get arrested for moonshining. And there's still moonshining is a huge part of the alcohol market. What else was we talking about here? Oh, waiting period. Yeah, I'm not against a 7-day waiting period either. Because, like Matt Dodge was talking about, it'll stop someone that's just feeling suicidal that day and then want to end it all. Usually a week, people that are in that kind of mood change their mind.
Well, yeah, that was MC that brought that up. I'm actually against the waiting period. And really just because Oregon doesn't have that high of gun violence, and we don't have a waiting period. We're also a very deeply blue state. So, I mean, the fact that we're open carry in this state also, I think, helps alleviate some of the gun violence. I don't want less guns on the street. I want more.
Oh, I would agree with that as well. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is if you actually wanted to reduce gun crime or gun violence, you would legalize full auto and ban pistols. So what they're asking to ban has nothing to do with actually reducing, gun violence, because full auto is so ineffective. The military have stopped using them. They go to 3-shot to 5-shot burst, or just semi-auto, because the only time they use the full auto is just to scare people into, not suppressing fire, essentially. And the pistol is by far way more dangerous and way more used than any rifle of any kind. It's scary. So they're using optics to manipulate people's mind and to push political rhetoric.
Yeah, just like they're encouraging these students to march for the optics. Look, our kids don't want guns, and they're the ones being killed, right?
Well, why are you allowing kids to be killed would be my response to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Why aren't you defending your children? Why is it that you're not allowed to defend these kids?
Oh, and I had one more thing I was going to say in the reality. The reality is the statistics across the globe, because they tried in the 90s and 2000s to do as a global ban on guns. The reality is it increases the deaths and the violence caused by guns whenever you actually get rid of them. It's kind. The other thing is, it's just that like
I don't know
seatbelt
about
effect.
that.
No, that's pretty damn solid math, man. You can go research it if you don't believe me. But yeah, what happens is it goes away from gun violence, but overall violence goes way up. Like, more people get knifed. But then it stays higher because the other end of that spectrum no one thinks about is defending yourself with the gun. Right? A big guy with the baseball bat is scared of a gun, but he's not scared of a woman with the baseball bat, or a big guy that's just unarmed. So the violence actually goes up in society. But there's another thing that no one thinks about. It's just that seatbelt effect. Whenever you have gun-free zones and stuff like that, you're lured into a false sense of security, which virtually anyone can break, as all these shootings and Muslim attacks and terrorist attacks always go for them zones because they know no one else is armed.
Well, you could make these zones work. It's just they don't.
Well, you could maybe by...
Yeah, I would like to know how you can make them work.
Well, you have major security, like above what the TSA obviously would have. You'd have screenings after screenings. You'd have guys, guys with sunglasses and their assault rifles standing by at all times, and stuff like that. That's how I would set it up.
What parent is going to send their children to school where they have to go through a metal detector and then follow that up with a frisk and removing their shoes, searching their backpack and their locker on a daily basis? And then after they do all that, on their way to class, they're walking by what looks like Secret Service agents. I'm not going to send my kids to that school.
I'd be fine with that.
Anybody else on the panel? What do you think about that idea?
I think you need to homeschool at that point.
That's what I was about to say. I think people should be homeschooling to start with. That's why I was for the voucher system before they try to screw it up and turn it into a Marxist fucking propaganda tool.
Okay,
right?
So let me ask a question.
Yeah,
are you fine with?
I learned pretty much all of my U.S. history from my parents. I didn't get anything out of school.
Let me ask some questions. Are you guys fine with students having to carry a student ID?
Yeah, I always had to have a student ID.
See,
We actually paid a little bit extra for the sticker on it to get into the football games. But yeah.
It's a huge
Why?
fucking inconvenience.
Why? At that point, then why don't you? You could use. Believe it or not, that's one of the worst things I ever saw was when they started handing out these freaking high school IDs. Why? Because now it's another form of control. They can then utilize that to sit up there and limit access to anything and everything. You talk about, frisking and this like that. Well, it's the first step, right? Show me your badge before you go through the gate.
Oh, we never got checked. We never got our student ID checked unless we were going to homecoming or prom or to the football games.
But here on campus at I'm not gonna say the name of the university, but they moved to a system where you can't enter any of the buildings without a student ID, and you can't even go to the library without it. And it was a real hassle when I was going, because like obviously I'm going to class, right? And the way they have it set up is even the buildings that are connected, you would still need to swipe through them, and it was like a big fucking hassle. It's because they didn't have guards who were capable of keeping the homeless people out, so they had to start setting up all these expensive ID stations.
Yeah, they had that on the college I was going to some decades ago. Similar reason.
Well, Coffee, were you able to get into the administrative building to where you could actually sign up for school at least? I mean, you can't have a student ID without being a student, and you have to sign up somewhere, right?
I don't even know why you're bringing that up.
Because I don't know, it just popped in my head.
You can't. I don't even think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think the military guys can carry their weapons on their bases or something like that.
No, most of the weapons are held within the arms room unless they're issued. It's not that they can't carry. It's not that they can't carry. It's just that they're always under control.
Well, Coffee, here's why that popped in my head. Because you can still shoot up the administrative building, and there's thousands of students there signing up for classes and signing up for school. So it really doesn't do much to improve the security of the college campus.
Well,
that's why it popped
had guys with guns by at all times, that would solve it.
My utopian idea is just to have every rational-minded adult carrying their own guns and stop being lured into a false sense of security that you don't need to protect yourself because it's current year. That would be my solution, but of course that would probably never happen. I mean,
yeah,
some of the smaller countries, that's pretty much what they do, but United States is too massive, too diverse.
You could make these security zones work. They just don't.
I don't know, because I live in a country where they have armed guards with the full metal detectors, and like they're there at the metal detector making sure every single person gets checked. And what happens is since that's the bottleneck itself, right, the line you have to go to, the bombers have been strapping backpack bombs and blowing up the lines.
Well, shit, that's what I would do.
You're creating an unsecure spot to get into security at that point. So even that's become a problem.
Yeah, it's more expensive though to fix the subway than it is to fix your scanning station. That's right. That does seem kind of inane to me.
Yeah.
And where is this?
Philippines.
Oh.
The thing is that if your schools, if it's known that your schools has people that are armed, right, or if you're looking at it from using some kind of methodology to prevent or control ingress and exits, right, then you're basically locking everything down. It isn't wide open anymore. Now when I grew up, right, our high school did not have fencing all around the school. Okay, I mean, it was easy enough for me if I decided to walk out the doors, walk out of the classroom, walk down the hall, walk out the doors, to just walk off campus.
Well, it's like Coffee said. They don't have it all secured to they don't have it completely locked down. It's just you show your ID whenever you go to school, and that's about it.
Well, what about the high school I went to? We had open campus, so where lunchtime we could walk to McDonald's or whatever and eat. Are you going to check as they're coming out and in of the school during every lunch day or lunch period.
That's why they all have cards.
Yeah, that wasn't why we had cards in my high school, is what I'm trying to point out. We literally had them for like the dances and the football games. We didn't get checked or searched way in and out. And this was post Thurston school shooting. So, yeah, I don't know.
No, but it's a process, man, Dodge. The thing is it's a process. It's building up to that. You take things one step at a time. What's the first step? Well, we make sure that they all have ID so that we can then identify them. Then the next step is we'll just ratchet it up a little bit more and then a little bit more. It's the frog in the pot where you slowly turn the heat up.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, why are they talking about, you know, there's about 6 different common debates you see all the time that could be solved by fixing something else because they are treating the symptoms, they're not treating the violence or the virus, right? Gun control, homelessness. There's quite a bit of stuff that the core is the mental health, and no one ever wants to talk about that legitimately. The only time they bring up mental health is when they think it is a wedge issue they can use to get a couple more votes. Normal, sane people having guns is not the problem. People that have clear mental issues is. So instead of worrying about how you can police, you know, millions of perfectly rational, sane people, why don't you figure out a solution to policing those that aren't?
Well, I saw a video yesterday on YouTube. It was by Mr. Dapperton, and he pointed out a fact that even I neglected. If you go on the Mental Health Association or the American Mental Health Association's website, they even say that the majority of people that are mentally ill are not violent. So even a majority of them are not violent. So are you going to open up the mental health records for everybody in the country to be performed a background check on? And is that even possible? Right now it's not, because you have patient doctor confidentiality.
Yeah, but
the
reality is, Bad Dodge, that whole thing, that's a symptom too, as far as I'm concerned. And what I mean by that is this: right? The reason you don't have that, the reason you've got these ridiculous laws about patient confidentiality and so forth and so on, is people no longer trust the medical field. People no longer trust the doctors. And when you start talking about the mental health aspects of it, it's even worse. Especially for people like me, I don't trust anything a psychiatrist or a psychologist say. All right, I don't. Why? Because they have such a bad reputation that they earned. All right, as a result, and so this becomes the problem. Yes, I understand what you're saying about, mental health is the biggest issue. Yes, and it would be wonderful if I could trust the mental health industry. All right, on these kinds of cases. But the reality is that there's far too many within the mental health community, all right, that have taken it upon themselves to turn this into political grandstanding, and have also stood up there and turned it to, well, how can I get something out of this? And they've created, quote unquote, mental diseases out of thin air to justify their existence.
Yeah, like making up was it fake studies that hadn't been reproduced to push antidepressants on moderately depressed people, which have proven to have 0 to no results.
We have Ritalin running rampant through these schools. Are these schools safer
for little
now?
Kids that can't even have ADD. Yeah, it's there's been all kinds of fucked up stuff there, but even what Mad Dodge said is a false dilemma, because it, like he said, it's not all those that have mental health issues. It's a very small minority, but that very small minority usually have a record, and no, that record actually isn't, or it's not it's not covered by the privacy laws. If I got right now went and started talking to a psychiatrist and said the moment I'm leave I'm going to murder everybody, he has the legal obligation to tell the police that. It is not covered by the client patient confidentiality clause.
Well, yes and no. Okay, so if he believes the threat is credible, or he or she, the psychiatrist, if they believe the threat is credible, they may notify the authorities. But if it turns out it's not credible and they forfeited patient-doctor confidentiality, they could be sued, they could be fired, and they could lose their license. That's why a lot of them don't notify anybody. Even if it is a credible threat, the threat to their own career is more important to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables, I guess.
So, I mean, once again, would we be including health records in with the background checks? Is that the way to make them more extensive? I believe it's a bad way, but I'm not sure how else you can make the background checks more extensive. They already do background checks at gun shows. I'm tired of the left saying they don't. They do.
Well, the left is good about telling people they need to do stuff they're already doing and then lying and saying they're not doing it so that way they can get more votes. That's another tactic they use commonly.
Well, how many times have they used the gun show loophole when it's been proven repeatedly that weapons from gun shows are not even a blip on the radar of guns that are used in crimes?
Or gun ownership in general. And then even then, that whole loophole thing is an utter lie because it's like, you know, was it someone did the numbers? There's like 20 guns that have been bought through that loophole in the last decade because it's very, very limited to who's allowed in that loophole. You have to be from a certain state. If you're in that state, you just buy it there. So you'd have to be in that from that state. In another state to even bother to go apply for the thing, it's a lot more complicated than they're trying to make it out to be. Well, it's like owning a machine gun. Yeah, you could own a machine gun, but only if it was an heirloom that was no longer fully functional and all kinds of shit attached to it, you know?
Well, yeah, the guns in the grand scheme of things in all these cases are completely irrelevant. Because there's multiple ways you can obtain a firearm, especially within the U.S. It's just it's not possible.
And even if the United States banned them all and like rounded up every single gun and melted them like they did in Australia, you know, the Mexican cartels have no qualms about selling them.
Well, they didn't get all of them. That's the thing.
They just ship them in.
Well, and you can't. Well, and you also can't pass a law that confiscates whatever you're making illegal from the past. So, like the assault weapons ban in I think '93 or '95, I don't remember. It was under Clinton. It didn't ban the assault weapon already owned. It banned selling them from that date on. So you're going to have a large amount of weapons and bump stocks if they still out on the market that are grandfathered in.
Oh, here's the thing. Most people don't even know what an assault weapon means. It has nothing to do with the weapon's lethalness or ability to fire. It's literally the look of the damn thing. I mean, if you take two identical guns, like the ones I always use, like to use the AR-15. You have. I looked at their website a couple of years ago. You have two different versions. It's the assault version, and then the wood stock version. Identical firing capacity, identical in every other way. The only thing that made it the quote assault was the black plastic. You know, not just stock, but you know the whole casing of the gun, how it physically looks.
Whatever.
Yeah, the poly instead of the wood. Well, I'm sorry, wood kill you just efficiently as everything else. So that's just another mental trick the left is using to try and create a wedge in something they literally have no idea of themselves. It just sounds scary. They're using optics and mental tricks to people that know nothing about firearms in order to convince them about shit that ain't true, in order to try and push their own agenda so they can gain power.
So you're telling me an AR-15 assault rifle refers to only the black version, not the woodstock version?
Yeah, that's the way it was. Because go look at the definition of assault rifle. Has nothing to do with your loading capacity or your firing rate, loading capacity, any of that stuff. It's talking about the actual appearance.
And it's
Yeah,
not like you're
I
going to be
believe
able
he's
to
right.
get a hold of one anyways.
There's some assault rifles
Not your
here
average
that
Joe anyways.
have wooden stocks.
I guess it was scary enough looking. But yeah, there was two, like I said, it was on the website about 3 or 4 years ago. There was two of identical of that one I was looking at. One was considered assault and the other one wasn't, even though they were identical guns in every other capacity. Here, I'll look it up right now.
I'm
We're
looking
on
at
the internet.
Wikipedia article.
What is it called? An FFL, Federal Firearms License. That's what you need in order to, I think, get or sell automatic assault rifles, quote unquote.
There you go. You've added a word to
you
that.
need an FFL to buy / or sell an
automatic
weapon.
I actually not me myself, but I do know a guy who knows a guy who sells automatic weapons.
Well, if you're going to be a gunsmith, if you're going to be listed as a gunsmith, someone that's allowed to work on guns, then generally you have to have an FFL as well.
Yeah, the guy's a tactical genius. He really knows his ins and outs of a firearm.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here in the definition of the assault rifle that denotes its color.
Assault rifle definition: rapid fire, magazine fed automatic rifle designed for infantry use. The infantry use. What makes it infantry versus hunting is hunters like the wood look because it helps hide,
Do you have the
traditionally when carrying it, it hides in the woods. As an infantry like the black stuff because, a lot of there's military, a lot of like warfare and stuff is done under cover of night.
MC. When the Clinton assault weapons ban came into effect, did it ban all AR-15s? Yes or no? Because I was there then. I didn't really pay attention.
No, well, probably the most outstanding feature which they defined an assault weapon is whether or not it had a bayonet lug attached. That was probably the most cosmetic feature that they had. So that and the flash suppressors. So if you have an AR-15 and you remove the flash suppressor and you remove the bayonet lug, you're free to sell it, regardless of what it was. And their main goal at the time wasn't the AR-15 that they were focusing on. They were actually trying to focus on the AK-47.
Yeah, the AK-47 is a beast of a weapon. It's used in military warfare for that purpose, and the problem is you can literally build them yourself with like pretty common to get stuff. I mean, common enough that they build them in the Middle East off of they have cheap ones they build off like non-rifled piping and all kinds of stuff they rifle.
You can literally you could literally build them from scrap.
Well, you can build an AR-15, really. I mean, from just with small amounts of metalworking, right? Anyone who has a CNC machine can sit up there.
Yeah.
If you were
Well, that's MC. That's what I was about to say. Is I ran a CNC machine for a living, and I also programmed it. So I could literally make a program to make myself a gun on the CNC machine. It's not hard. The hardest part would be rifling the inside of the barrel because I don't necessarily know how to do that. That would be the hardest thing for me.
Go online. People can show you how to do it with just threaded rod. It's a
Yeah. Well, there you go then.
They see this is the problem. This has been the problem the entire time, right? It's not as difficult as people necessarily think it is if you really are interested in doing some of this stuff. If you're determined to purchase these kind of weapons or utilize these kind of weapons, the problem isn't that. The problem is as Lich was saying, the people that are insane. All right, the people that are intending to do violence. There has to be an understanding of who these people are, why there's so many more of them, and what their targets are. And unfortunately, when you create an area where you say this is a gun-free zone because it's a school, you are giving these kind of lunatics a target. If you sit up there and made it so that all schools, you made it known that in all schools teachers are allowed to concealed carry at least, and sometimes they'll carry outside, I guarantee you that becomes less of a target in the minds of the potential perpetrator because they're looking for mass casualties with which they can't guarantee if there are people walking around armed. Now, if you have a single armed guard, all right, and he's always posted and sitting at the same place, then it's not going to be nearly as effective.
Well, mostly it's just one cop.
Right. Well, I understand that, but if this is why I said you had to have people with concealed carry as well. If it becomes known that the school is armed, for example, this school, most high schools don't have, but in this school they had an ROTC program. Right. If these ROTC kids, right, had actual weapons rather than airsoft rifles, this would not have happened.
I'm not sure I'd trust a bunch of I know I wouldn't trust a bunch of other kids with guns, but maybe the teachers.
Well, once again, it's in a controlled environment, all right, but at the
You're
same
talking
time,
about
the ability to respond rapidly is dramatically increased in these kind of situations. You definitely wouldn't have a freaking Boko Haram, what happened in Nigeria with Boko Haram, where they just went into a school and grabbed 50 girls and left.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if someone went insane and started shooting people, they might get maybe 2 or 3. You wouldn't get 20 or 30 because people got to wait around for 20 minutes for the police to finally show up because their nearest post is 20 miles away or something. The other thing is why not? I mean, here's another thing that no one talks about is like, I know I lived out in the back boony woods, but it wasn't even that uncommon in the larger cities some decades before I was in school. You had people, they would bring their shotguns, their pistols, or hunting rifles to school all the time for hunting, or you'd have even like, hunting organizations that a lot of times it would be like the gym teacher would be over and they'd take all the teenagers out to go hunting after class or whatever. Access to explosives, you could go in, anyone, old enough to talk could go in to like a gun store and buy 5 pounds of black powder, no problem. I remember, just my older brothers used to always have dynamite for what they call stumping, right? It's where you would take a stick of dynamite, tie it to a stump, and light it instead of trying to use these stump removers, which at the time you didn't have. All you had was explosives. And you never had all this shit, right? And yeah, it's a problem that humans are disconnected from other people. You can physically see it whenever you just go out. You got 4 or 5 friends sitting around. Instead of actually talking to each other and looking at each other in a restaurant, they're sitting there tweeting to each other. It's like you're standing right next to each other. Why don't you fucking talk? Because people have been so isolated that their only outlet to other people is the internet or their phones, and they have defaulted to that even in normal situations where you would just communicate and be a part of humanity. I guarantee most of these kids wouldn't have went insane and shot up fucking schools if they had groups of friends that actually supported them.
Yeah, I mean, we are getting more detached from our surroundings as the technology increases in our everyday lives, aren't we? Are we not?
Yeah, and I wish more people would get hit crossing the street because the amount of people that I see walking, not even looking both ways. You know, you want to talk about being detached from reality. That's like one of the main ones that I see.
Well, some of us need it nowadays, but yeah, if there was like any kind of just uh if technology just went down, what would your average Joe do? This is something a friend of mine was talking about, and he's kind of I guess more or less of a libertarian, but he's not a real Trump fan, but he's like, yeah, if society were to ever collapse in any real way, what the fuck would people do? You know?
If society started to collapse, what people would do is die in droves.
Yes.
Well, it
Because
wouldn't
there's
even
too
have to
many
be
people who don't even know
society.
how to feed themselves.
Yeah. I say it doesn't even have to be like they have power or anything. Just what happened if they cut the backbone to like AT&T? Accidentally something cut it to the rest of the world that shut off like 90% of the internet. That's a real question. Because yeah, most people don't even know how to cook anymore. They can't even just like. They don't even know what the stove is for.
You know, the first thing I'd do is go back to the farm and get out of this fucking city.
Yeah.
Well, dude, you're in a perfect area. The Amish would help you guys out if all hell broke down. At least they have food and shit.
No, they fucking wouldn't. They'd Jew you for you think Jews are bad. You just wait until you try to buy some food from them.
The Amish, like, don't they like Trump? Most of them voted for Trump, I believe.
have no idea. I would think most of them wouldn't vote at all.
Yeah, I thought they considered themselves separate from the rest of society, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, we don't have Amish around here. We have
voted for
Mennonites.
Trump, I believe.
I would most of the time they don't vote at all.
That's true, but not in this election, or the last one, I should say.
Anyway, people, I gotta go. I got things to do. I just wanted to debunk some of these myths before I take off.
All right, have a good one, Colt. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, we're probably going to go another 10 or 15. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. So this was the only real topic I had was the NRA and bump stocks and all that. Speaking of the NRA, Coffee,
Okay.
do you think the left could possibly kill the NRA like they're saying they want to? And by kill them,
the NRA is a bunch of gun nuts. It's not going to get killed. Do you know any like people that are like gun nuts? Like, they know all kinds of different, like, this handgun versus that handgun. They're done at the range every other weekend. They've got stockpiles of ammo. Those kind of people are not, they're not going to let the NRA die.
Yeah, but the NRA could turn against its base, especially when it supports these increasing measures in gun control. They are for the bump stock ban,
There has to be
you know, and
there has to be some kind of wheeling and dealing going on in the background because the NRA was one of the first groups to support Trump. So I don't know. They probably asked the same question I did, which was, what's the practical purpose of the bump stock?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's shit. It's completely ineffective. You'd be better with just having a regular semi-auto weapon with trying to kill people, of course.
yeah, or even a deer. I mean, I couldn't imagine hunting with a bump stock. First off, if you miss, which you probably will, you're going to scare any other game around for miles away. I mean, you're not going to catch shit that day. But that being said, any final thoughts, you guys? We might just go ahead and wrap it up. And I do think it might have been a small YouTube glitch. It's saying that I'm below 1,000 on my screen too, but 8 something. That's a lot better than I was doing. So thank you for any new subscribers. And Super Chat worked once. We'll see if it works on Friday. I don't know.
Good luck to you.
Well, I do stand corrected on the Amish thing. It looks like it was 50-50 Democrat-Republican for Ohio and PA.
Oh, so they do vote.
10,403 for the Democrats who, well, the GOP registered 10,403. The Democrats registered 9,961. It's less than 500 people difference.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, pretty crazy.
But they don't have the actual numbers here. So color me surprised.
Like I said before, you could make. I'm not against. I'm a big fan of increasing security. It just has to be done right. You could make these security zones work. You just have to do it right.
All right. Well, everybody's quieting down, so I'm guessing that's about it. This has been the Redeye stream number 86. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And hopefully I'll be back over 1,000 soon. I don't know what happened. Fuck you, YouTube. Fuck you. Good night and
Peace
good luck.
out.